My name is Jack Henderson.
And my name is Kayla Cole, and I'll be analyzing Magic Mike. Magic Mike gives viewers a greater example of violence and white masculinity and gender inequality. An example of violence and white masculinity in Magic Mike is when Adam had stole the drugs and owed the dealer a certain amount of money. However, he never paid the amount, and the dealer then showed up at Mike's house demanding for the money. However, when he demanded for the money, he had people that started to beat him right away instead of walking in and just asking to talk to Adam and Mike about it like a simple adults. Another example of violence and white masculinity is when Mike and Adam went to a sorority house and Adam slipped one of the sorority girls a pill, and her boyfriend had watched him do that, and her boyfriend's friends had hyped him up to go fight Adam and Mike instead of just simply asking like, why would you do that, and handling like simple adults would.
So I will be talking about Jackson Kratz's article, Advertising and the Concentration of Violent White Masculinity. So, in his article, he kind of talks about how violent masculine men usually come from former athletes or current military men, or even in like the public theater. So, examples that were brought about within our discussions were Hollywood movies, and typically those are action movies. Another, like, I guess, famous person that he talks about would be Eminem and how he posed for an advertisement in a pool of blood. And then Abercrombie and Fitch also released a mall like poster board with a football player wearing their clothing, which kind of symbolized that in order to be a strong, tough man, you should wear Abercrombie and Fitch.
Both the movie and article strongly display violence, white masculinity, and gender inequality. Now, Jack, I'll be asking you a few questions. How do you think Magic Mike displays violence and white masculinity and gender inequality?
So, for the white masculinity portion, I really liked the example in the movie where all of the strippers kind of got in a hustle over money, like the drug money. An example being when the DJ's guys raided Mike's house looking for the kid and the money that came with the drugs. When it could have been simply solved by having a conversation with Mike, and Mike could have said, "Hey, I haven't talked to the kid in a while, and he's not living here." But instead, it just got really blown up. For the gender inequality portion, I liked how Mike is a stripper, a male stripper, and when you think of a stripper, you typically think of a female, and how it just really doesn't matter who's doing what because either can do it. There's no boundaries based off gender. Now, I would like to ask you a question. In relation of Jackson Cass's article, Advertising and the Construction of Violent White Masculinity, to the film Magic Mike, there are several examples of violent white masculinity. What are some that stood out to you?
In Magic Mike, a great example of violence and white masculinity would be Adam's anger. His sister gave an example of how before he started stripping, he had a full scholarship for football, and then he lost it because he got angry and started to hit his coach. There was no background information on why he got angry and hit his coach, but that is a perfect example of violence and white masculinity. He was at a football game and he got angry, and he thought right away that hitting his coach would be the answer instead of talking to him about it and handling like real adults would.
Now, a follow-up question for that I have for you is, with the article and the movie, Cass speaks on how young white males can sometimes feel like an outcast to their community. What is a good example of an outcast within Magic Mike?
I think the perfect example of an outcast in Magic Mike would be Brooke, Adam's sister, as she was very hesitant when she found out he was stripping, and she didn't quite understand why. I think that also leans back to where he had a scholarship, and at one point she kind of thought, well, he has his life on track, like he's going to go to college and play football, and then he'll figure it out from there, and now he's stripping and getting caught up in drugs and money and alcohol, and he's just going down the wrong path. I think she felt like an outcast because she was trying to wrap her head around why her brother thought stripping was the greater idea instead of doing something better for himself in life. And I think she felt like an outcast in that as she was trying to wrap her head around that, but she couldn't understand.
That's pretty good.
Now I have one last question for you. After our discussion, can you better explain violence in white masculinity and gender inequality?
Yeah, I can. So I would say that the white masculinity portion really touches on how the little things can upset the male race, and that whether that be in military or in sports, it just typically is violent within those type of people. But I would also say that this can be associated to both the male and female, not just to males in particular, like the movie shows. I believe that women can get as equally mad and as equally uncomfortable as men can in some situations. It just was not perceived that way in the movie.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
would say now we all have a greater understanding for violence and white masculinity, and that violence is never the answer, and the right way to handle it is to talk like adults. I think we have also learned that there's no one job for men or women. Anyone can do the job, and there's no reason for gender inequality.
I would agree. I really think Kratz's article is a very good article to use for Magic Mike. I feel like they go hand in hand together.
I really